I'm joined as ever by Laure Jackson of Santé in Jersey. Hello, Anne.
Hello, it is great to be here and wishing everybody good sensory health today.
Just remind me, because I've forgotten, what does Santé mean again?
Oh, santé actually means health. So it's
Oh,
like santé in French is you go cheers, to your good health.
yeah.
So yeah, to your sensory health.
Okay, cool. I saw it. I thought, I know what this means, but I can't remember. So I thought I'd just ask you because it's the name of your business.
Yeah, because my mum's French and I'm half French, so that's where a little something, a certain je ne sais quoi to add to the, or no, just it's a nice name.
Let's just go there momentarily because you're half French. So that means you've got parents of two different languages, nations, cultures.
Uh-huh.
How did you adjust being a child of two very different, I mean, cultures are always going to be diametrically opposed in some ways, completely
Yeah.
flawlessly the same in others. How
Yeah.
did that affect your sensory health? Or does it?
Oh, sensory health? I'm not sure. That's an interesting question. I know it definitely affected me, because mum's quite a fiery, passionate French lady. It's funny. I think somebody said I've got the best of both, but I could have the worst of both. So I have
Depends on the
that
time
passion
of
and
day.
that enthusiasm, but gently in a very British way of doing it.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, but it could be all, interpreted in other ways. But I definitely had a problem with being brought up bilingual. I kind of really did not like being spoken to in French, although I could understand everything, but I would speak back in English and did do. In fact, I probably still do now. I don't think I ever gave mum a proper conversation back the way. Although my dad was a French teacher, so he took me through GCSEs, O levels as it was back at the time, and I didn't need to go into class. He just taught me because he knew I knew most of it. There were just some bits that I needed to do to pass the exam. So there were definitely that was a definite positive. But yeah, interesting experiences. Having holidays with the French family and that different sensory environment. So I suppose there's those things that were slightly different, but thankfully, mum was quite, affectionate, and that was lovely. So I appreciated that bit. Mm.
I mean, I was thinking just about smells of cooking. So when I went to France 3 times, the one thing that always struck me was the smell in the kitchen, which was divine, by the way, was completely different to anything I'd ever experienced in the UK, which felt like a weird thing to say. It feels like a weird thing to say, but
Uh-huh.
French cooking is very different in terms of the smells that you'd expect to find that I would never have had. Leek. They made leek soup. I wouldn't touch leek today. I ate soup in France that was leek because it was totally different.
Uh-huh. It's funny, yes, because with mom and dad living with us, I still have those smells. But I suppose because I grew up with them, then that's just my norm. It is my norm. But you are totally right. If I pay attention to it, which is all about what sensory health is, it's about paying attention to those sensory experiences that we all have. Most of us don't pay attention and are conscious and don't focus on those things. But when they're brought to attention, you realize, oh yeah, that is important.
Yeah.
So yeah, I still have those smells, mind you, because of course I'm still in the same household.
Cool. Right, I have a question for you, which I will pull up in front of me that reads, well, it will read when the thing opens up. Come on. There we go. Right. We went to a speaking engagement recently and we noticed some in the audience who seemed perhaps a little bit restless and fidgety. Although later, as it turned out, they were very, very interested and engaged. What would be your recommendations for people who might struggle to sit during a talk? Are fidget toys always the answer? Or are there other helpful things that we can do to create sensory healthy speaking events? And I'm going to add a little addendum that I came to as I read it when they're not allowed to move.
Mm, okay, I think that is a brilliant question and something that lots and lots of people will need to address. I'll go back to one story first, of someone that I've worked with, and then I'll go back to general principles. So what came to me as you were saying that was somebody who went to a cinema and they would get up and they would turn and they would twirl around and then sit down again. But they'd be at the front of the cinema, and it was naturally quite disturbing. And people just did not like that, and they did not appreciate it. Of course, he could have just gone to the back, and that would have been a simple solution. But instead, because he liked being close to the screen, he liked being up front to be able to perceive everything really well and get the full intensity of the whole experience. So we used to, before he went to the cinema, we would get him doing some gym work, some physical stuff. If he could cycle to the cinema, and that's going to be one of the core principles to take into your question. But we had that, and we also then made sure that he was full of different things that he could do. So it wasn't just little fidgets for his hand, although they were part of his little pack, and he had this little it's like a bum bag or a sling bag, just something which is a bit bigger than typical and what wasn't appropriate for a male to take. Mums would be fine with their handbags, but it had more things in there for him to actually pull on and to push on, not just kind of like, not just the spinny things that are just for the fine finger, but for more of the upper body work as well. And yeah, so he would always, stand up and spin and then sit back down again. So yeah, he could do that at the back if he wanted to, or just disappear off, or ideally fill his tank, which is often what we describe it as, fill his sensory tank before the cinema, get him doing as much as he possibly can, as much as possibly could, and then come take a seat, have things for his feet to pommel on, have things for his upper body to work with, and make sure there's the popcorn or the crunchy things that, again, not too noisy, but will give enough impact or chewing for the mouth to take over from needing that full movement experiences. So it's trying to use the other senses to keep the physical body in place. But an hour and a half to 2 hours, it's a long time for some people to sit, for sure. And if somebody can't keep quiet. So say that if they were at this event and they'd filled themselves up beforehand, so they'd gone to the gym, they'd gone for a swim, they'd gone trampolining, they'd gone bungee jumping, whatever was in their area, or they'd just done a home workout, stuck on YouTube, done something from home, made sure that they had some really good proprioceptive vestibular input for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Again, you have to find your own sensory thumbprint to know quite how much you need in order for you to be able to then sit. Or you might need to do a Pilates class or something. Set yourself up, set your body up so that it's physically more filled to be able to sit, and then use the other strategies to try and keep them sitting. And if they can't, well, then they just need to move position, because that's what the body needs to do. And if you can't override it with things that you might listen to, the things that you're watching, things that you're chewing on, there's not too much more, apart from maybe having visual timers so that you set yourself little targets of, right, I'm going to sit for 10 minutes, and you put a little time timer, or you set something on your watch that vibrates rather than makes a sound. And then you get yourself a little tick, and then you've got some rewards, or you're gonna treat yourself to something after it's finished, so you've got that extra motivation to override what's going on physically. We kind of use, if it's really important, we need to use every single strategy we can to help that be a successful experience. So setting the body up before, doing the best we can with all the senses while they need to be in there, and then working out ways of just giving themselves a real treat and a real reward and a thank you and a well done to myself, and pat yourself on the back and go and treat yourself. So
I was thinking about how in the culture today, it's very much, I want to do this, so you have to take whatever you like. I don't care. I am me, and you just have to accept that. That's tough. And I think there's a degree of that that's quite helpful, in that we do need to think about others. But there's also the degree, which is what I'm thinking about as we look at gardening again later, of how what we do impacts others. So that person who's standing up in front of a cinema, I would imagine in today's culture will get quite a lot of abuse, stuff thrown at them, whether it's popcorn or words of "sit down, you're in the way," because they're destroying the environment for other people. We're in a very intolerant society, I would say, increasingly intolerant, actually. So we do need to consider how we impact others, which is why, as you say, that there are a lot of things that you can do rather than get into the front of the cinema. Because my first thing is, if you want to do that, sit at the back. I know you like to sit at the front, but tough. Sit at the back, and then you won't disturb anybody. That's where my brain would immediately go. Or I've seen it in a church service when I've done an all-age service, and the kids want to run around. It's like, that's not okay. Sometimes, but not right now. And I remember in one time I had to actually say to stop what I was doing, say, parents, I need you to keep your children away because they're going to get hurt soon, because I'm walking around quite a lot. And if they keep on doing that, I'm going to injure one of them, because I can't keep track of all these children who are where they shouldn't be. It was inappropriate. And we do need to consider, don't we? And we come up with this a lot of not just what we need to do, but how does that impact somebody else?
That fine balance is massive, and it's nice to know when we automatically think something like go and sit at the back, um, where the obvious can be obvious and can work great, but we do need to have that conversation to make sure that it's not too much of a compromise one way or the other. Because as I say, his experience, what was really important to him was that he was sitting close to the screen. So more than anything, that's what I had to take into account first. Otherwise, I would have worked on all the other bits and pieces. So it's just like, okay, his number one is being close up front, but that is going to have an impact on everybody else. So what can I do to do that? Whereas if he had been in a different place or he wouldn't have minded being at the back, that would have been a much easier solution because then he could, as long as he was quiet, that's the other thing. Could they be quiet? Because people do not, the whole experience is the fact that nobody makes a noise in the cinema either, because the noise you want to get the intensity of either the power of the music or the expression coming through, or the silence that is just as impactful. So
That's why you're the occupational therapist and I'm the radio presenter, perhaps. May have revealed that one. But that leads me nicely on. So we looked at gardening last week in terms of sunbathing and how does that look in a garden. I ended up going a little bit off at a tangent, thinking about, for example, cutting the lawn and you get little bits of hardened grass or weeds or whatever, and it gets in your shoes. And I was talking about how that actually doesn't bother me, even though I can feel it, because I know it's not actually damaging me. Yes, it's a bit annoying, but it's all right. You just get through what you got to get done. If it's poking me and it's actually hurting quite severely in an acute way, I'm going to take my shoes off on it. I'm going to get rid of the grass or whatever thorn that may have landed in there. But I was thinking about, as we're looking at gardening part 2, the impact of us on people around us. Now, we're very fortunate where we live. If I turn the TV on to full, nobody's going to hear it because no one's close enough to even know we exist because we're in the middle of nowhere. The pigs next door might get a bit frustrated, but actual pigs, by the way. But I was thinking about how when we're in the garden, we can impact others, can't we? Because there's noises. I'm going to have a party in my garden. I'm going to have lots of loud music. We'll have people laughing and joking, and that's great. We're going to have a great time. And the poor person next door who's working nights is not going to be as favorably inclined to your desire for loud fun as they would be to wanting to sleep so they don't drive tomorrow, fall asleep and kill somebody. And it can be a challenge. So if you've got good neighbors, you say to them, and I've met people who've done this, we're having a party. Here's £100 for you to go to a restaurant. Please, with our thanks and gratitude and love and concern for you, go and have a meal. We're buying you a meal so you can go away. And I don't think that's selfish. The people were genuinely like, we want to make some noise, but we know it's going to impact. So rather than irritating and whining people, the next like 2 or 4 houses is like, here's £100. It's costing us a fortune anyway. So in the context, £100 times 4 wasn't a great deal. So therefore, go and have a meal.
That is powerful. That is amazing. That is so considerate. I was behind you thinking that, they'll go and speak to their neighbours and let them know and, do all that kind of thing and find out if that was going to be a problem for them or, whatever. But actually, no, you've you've gone way, way beyond and actually just given them something so that they can actually, they don't even have to be in that environment. They can be elsewhere if they'd like to be.
I only heard it once and I knew the people and thought, well, as they said, we're buying lots of alcohol. It's very expensive. So £100, £400, it's not a lot of money for this big, like, end of summer blowout party. They had 100 people come in or something. So £100 times 4 wasn't a big deal. That's just, a few bottles of champagne, really, but posh stuff. But that's what they did. And I thought, well, that's going way beyond to ensure the sensory health, as I might call about it today, is being cared for from these other people of saying, here's a meal on us. If you choose to just keep the £100 cash, please don't complain. But we're inviting you to leave so you don't have to be frustrated.
That is a beautiful thing. That is a really beautiful thing. And a hint for anybody who has neighbours or is intending to do something similar. Yeah, great. Respectful.
Because they had every right to say, well, it's before whatever the cut off, before the council come along and shut you down. We're allowed to make noise until this point. Well, yes, but you also live next door to that person for the next 364 days. And if you wind them up properly today, there's every possibility they're going to wind you up more. And then you have all sorts of problems and the police get called because there's a punch up because they left the iron on. I could see the light from my shed and it really wound me up. That's where you end up if you don't think of others more first.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that's such a strong thing. Anything that you know that's going to impact, so visually as well. Fireworks is tricky
Mm.
because they go up so far, and visually they're like really powerful. But yes, anything, but no, noise is a massive one. So we really do have to watch any noise impacts, visual things, smells and sights. And yeah, so if there are, the thing about the fireworks also, when they land, if there are neighbours too, so it's not just letting them know that there might be noises, but also that you might be prepared to go around and clear up afterwards. Yeah, that's a nice thing.
But that's where I was thinking about gardening part two. It isn't just I've cut the grass. There's stuff in my shoes, and it's really annoying me. We've got combine harvesters all around us at the moment, so we've got more flies. I went out for a walk the other day, and we gave up. There are too many bugs, and Nathan said it's because they've just been evicted by the combine harvester because now their homes on all the crops that are being taken down. Well, now they've got nowhere to live. They're up in the air, and it made it quite frustrating. So we gave up on the walk after about 3 minutes. Came home and sat at home wiping bugs off us. Hadn't thought about that one. I did say we were right in the countryside. We really are. So that was one of those things that we hadn't envisaged is bugs galore. Okay, so with the combine harvesters out, let's not go out of the house unless we're
Mhm.
going very far out of the house because it's just going to wind us up. But I was just thinking about how we impact those around us. I
Mm.
know in the past we used to have some parties like 25 years ago at our house, Wolverhampton, but we're always very careful to say to the neighbours, look, we're doing this. Not we're doing it whether you like it or not. Not a good approach, but just saying we're doing this. We just wanted to let you know and make you alert to what's going to happen. And we did
Mhm.
it when we had fireworks for our 10th wedding anniversary. I went 2 doors down to a farmer and I said, we've got fireworks. I've got a gun dog, he said. Don't care in the slightest. My dog will be excitedly watching, not
Uh,
going to be upset because we try to think of other people.
yeah, yeah. How precious. It's just one of those things. If that's one thing for this week that someone will take away, it's just like, what can I do to think about what I'm doing that might affect somebody else, and how can I make that easier for them?
I remember living in a house years ago, and it was quite a big family, and most of the family had gone away for a holiday, and they said, "We're going away. Our son is here. Please tell him if he makes too much noise." By the time we called the police, because we couldn't actually get him to hear the front door because his music was too loud, keeping all of us in the house awake at 2 o'clock in the morning, he only turned it down when the police came and there was no noise. Funny that. We got really wound up by it because it was affecting our sleep. It was affecting our children who were awake at 2 o'clock in the morning because their bedroom happened to be a semi-detached house. Therefore, the other side of the brick wall in their bedroom was this guy who wanted to see how much noise he could make. And it really did get to us because it wasn't then just the noise is a bit irritating. We all know that a bit of noise we don't like, oh, it can be a bit annoying. We don't want to hear that. This was getting to the point of actually enraging us because in
Mm.
our own home, we are shouting in order to be heard, which the kid didn't like. But if we talked, we couldn't hear. It was that bad. Um, Not making that one up. But we ended up having to shout in the house. And that was enraging us because now we're having to shout, which takes a lot of energy.
Mm.
Well, if we'd have carried that into the garden, that may well have not just been us getting angry. That could have been us getting quite angry with the guy next door. He could have got, and when we finally spoke to him, it's my house. I can do what I want. No,
Mm.
you can't. So,
Well, you can actually, but it's hard. But yeah, so I'm just thinking that I just like like you really feel for people. You just think, where are they at to have that kind of attitude?
yeah.
What has gone on in them? What is the healing that they need in order to realize that they can be loved if they would just consider other
Mhm.
people. They can be lovable. They can be, they can be good neighbors. They can, it's really hard to get into the mind of someone who chooses to do that. It's one thing through lack of awareness, and I think probably every single one of us can hold our hands up to saying, "Oh yeah, I just didn't think, I didn't realize, or I didn't know." And most of us would be, I think, in that position where we'd say, "Look, oh yeah, hand up, sorry, I'm really sorry," and we can apologize and we can make a change for the next time. But when there's an absolute decision not to, I just think that they need help. They really do. It's not nice.
I wouldn't have come from that perspective, but again, that's why I'm not doing your job.
Dare no, I won't ask that. That's okay.
But the thing is about gardening, we can have good neighbours. So some friends of mine years ago, and there was a fence, and when they moved into the house, the fence was about that high. It was like 6 inches because the previous neighbors had gotten so well together. They liked to just hop into each other's garden and have a chair, and they'd known each other for a long time. So when they bought the house, it's like, where's the fence? It's down there. That's not a fence. A fence should be 6 feet tall and blocking out next door for privacy. Yeah, but we didn't do that. And they actually stuck with it because they quite liked it. It was a boundary marker, but it
Yeah.
wasn't, as they both had on opposite sides, 6 foot fences,
Right.
because they liked being with each other. But of course, when they bought that house off the previous folk, you could tell there was, well, yes, but where's the boundary? Because now I can't sit in my garden without you staring into my kitchen.
Yeah, and that's a real visual. That's a phenomenal visual, and it's an interpersonal space thing, and it's just like, yeah, just how much am I prepared to let people in, or how much do I want to see? There's some people that really thrive on that visual stimulation. That's feeding their visual sometimes underreactivity or that sensory seeking, and they love to have things that they can watch all the time. So therefore, people will choose a house where it has a view, where there is something that is changing, where the weather will change if they've got a mountain view. Okay, the mountain doesn't change, but actually the sheep on the mountain might, or the weather's going to change an awful lot, and they like that visual stimulation. So therefore, they will choose to live in a place like that. Whereas others who may not be so bothered about the visual might be really happy in town where it's exactly the same, pretty much. There's very, very few changes apart from what the weather's doing. There's not a lot of other natural things that are going to change with the leaves or the birds or the animals that might go around, and that's all part of that visual environment. That's a major digression from gardening, but yeah.
Well, it's to do with the garden, which I think counts.
There we go. That's fine.
But
Actually, something I do want to say about gardening, that actually,
yes,
like thinking about it, the one thing that I absolutely love is getting in there physically. So that my one big takeaway that I would love people to take away about the power of gardening is that physical input, is that proprioceptive digging, pulling weeds, moving things about, doing the wheelbarrow, potting. Yes, there is some tactile input in all of that stuff, but the physicality of gardening, if you've got anybody who is restless, so say, for example, that person that was out at that out at that event, if you'd have had them an hour in the garden, like moving things around, digging, all the rest of it, that's just as good as them being down the gym or going bungee jumping or whatever, if that's something that they enjoy doing. So that not only are they happy in that place doing what gardening does because it's so fresh and alive, but it's also massively sensory inputting. It's giving them so much good stuff into their body that would set them well up for, for sitting.
I was having a chat the other day with Nathan about exercising and all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
Today, generally speaking, you would buy your membership at your local gym. And if you want to have a run or do some weights or whatever, you go to your gym and that's where you do it. Going back 50 years, there were basically no gyms, and your gym was the garden because you probably had an allotment. You would be doing all of that, which is really hard work. It's very physical. And I guess people 50 years ago probably wouldn't have been able to run quite as easily as we can today. They would possibly in some ways have been fitter. I mean, forget the salt thing on meat. Let's not leave that one to one side. But actually, they'd have probably been fitter and healthier in many ways, just because the very exercising of doing your garden is a massive workout, which is what I was thinking about for gardening. It's what Nathan and I chatted about the other day, because we've got a big garden and we're trying to do some work. We've got to work out how to get the lawnmower working, because I think the carburetor, which I now know what that is, didn't know before, that's, I think, a bit gunged up. So we're going to take that apart, some fine finger work to fix that one. And then we can get back onto gardening. But we have like a half-acre grass garden. It's enormous. So in order to do that takes quite a lot of work. We let it go for a few weeks and all of a sudden we've got weeds that are literally 4 feet tall. It was mad. But it's a workout. So how we even exercise, we've lost that connection, I guess, is where I was going with this, to being in a garden. Because now we just think of gardenings as little paddling pool, maybe a bit of sunbathing and a drink with our friends, and that's it. But you go back in time, that's not what they were for. It was a place of food, pretty much.
Oh, utterly. And that was so brilliant. The functional fitness that one of my sons likes to call it. He's very much a functional fitness kind of a guy. Whatever it is, whether it means that because he mows the lawn by hand, it's none of this like electric stuff, which obviously if you've got half an acre, then yeah, you probably will. Unless you're particularly keen on getting that proprioceptive input for that amount of time and you have the time to spare, which I know in your household is time is precious.
Yes.
So yeah, and that's always that's the balance between. But years ago, there were so many more things like washing the laundry, even doing the dishes, so many physical, manual things were so good for feeding our systems, so good for feeding our systems from a regulation perspective, so we can be more emotionally calm and organized and regulated. It's just that our lives got busier and people started to go out for more to work more, which is what happened with the females in particular, and therefore time became the biggest pressure. So all of that good physical input that folks were getting, a lot of that disappeared off and out of our lifestyles.
So my US mom's mom used to bake bread for the family of 8 children, always by hand because you're going back a little bit in time. Yes, bread makers are great, but they didn't exist back then, not on a domestic scale. But she would bake, I don't know, was it half a dozen loaves of bread sometimes? But all of that dough was hand kneaded. I mean, I can't comprehend how fit she must have been, and
Yeah.
probably still is, because of the amount of normal daily exercise.
Mm. And I saw a post. I think this person were they 77 or in their 80s actually? They were in their 80s and they saw that like the beforehand, just walking on the Zimmer and, hunched over and crouched over. And then they just decided, or somebody decided to come alongside them and give them some strength training. So basic things like kneading dough, like physically. I mean, there were weights involved and all kinds of things. And you could see within a few months the difference in this, what would have been classed as this old lady on a Zimmer frame, all crouched over. And there she's not needing support at all. She's upright and she's walking. She has strength and she has power. And I just think, yeah, we are losing the essence. Yes, folks get old, of course we do. We all do that. That's the natural way of things, and then we die. Full stop. That's it. Well, it's not a full stop. Hallelujah. But it's just like physically, this portion on Earth, that is it, and we know that's what it is. But it doesn't always need to be this significant deterioration that we think it is. Other things will change and grow old, but we can, with a lot of training, with continuing to keep our senses as healthy as possible, we can go a lot further, well, than descend into kind of old age kind of misery.
I guess in that, which is part of a conversation we've had as a family in a completely different context, but there's an awful lot we accept that I don't think, have to accept as we currently do. Like little old lady on a Zimmer frame, hunched over. We can all see in our mind's eye what that looks like. And okay, we get old, like you say, we get weaker and more tired. Yes, we do. But perhaps we're sometimes accelerating the growth state, the sort of ungrowthing stage, tell English, because we accept that's what's supposed to happen. But not necessarily in the same way in the garden. We don't have to accept things like that person at the front of the cinema. I don't think I'd have accepted that. I don't actually genuinely think I would have said, could you please stop doing that? Because that's really distracting. Because that's the sort of thing that really winds me up. It's like you're not thinking about anybody else. Or if you are, you don't care enough about everybody else because that's quite a selfish act. Now, there's a sensory perspective which you provided, but that's not where my brain would go. Because I just think, but you can't not know that there are people who you're now distracting because you want to be there for that reason. So that's where I'm not a therapist of any sort, and you are. But I think so often we accept what we don't need to accept as we age or spending time in the garden or driving or whatever. I think there are things we accept we don't actually need to. And I think that's why we're in this increasingly intolerant society, which is certainly my perspective, because we're accepting things that we don't agree with, or we're just not prepared to accept things. And we get in this mash of emotional angst because we're accepting things that we just don't need to, which is where sensory health can make such a difference because you can say, you don't have to accept that. We can do something different.
And then having it enables folks to settle within themselves rather than getting frustrated with either themselves or with others. If we can put it's not putting a spin on it. I don't, because we've tended to use that word quite negatively, but it is framing it differently, to allow a different way of seeing something, so that folks can everybody. How I've defined sensory health is being calm, content, coordinated and confident. That is as much about the individual who has clear sensory processing issues themselves, as well as the rest of us who are just sensory beings. So it's how this kind of mindset and interpreting behaviors and seeing things from that sensory healthy perspective gives that element, that scope for the potential that there might be something else going on for that person, so that it's easy for that compassion to come out rather than the anger or the frustration or the annoyance and the intolerance to come out instead.
If anybody comes to my house, you will find a few things. One, there are coasters in pairs in quite a few places. You will find, if we're making a cup of tea and a mug goes back, there's a lid on top of that. We have some water jugs that we used to fill the water filter. That's always got a lid on it. We're not crazy. My wife goes to bed with a coaster and a coaster. Coaster goes on top. Why? Because she found a ladybird in her drink. Now, when I drink, if you look carefully, my eyes tend to go down a little bit. I'm checking for flies. Why? We're not mad, but we live in a countryside area. There are pigs very well looked after actually next door. That means more flies. So you have two ways of going about this. We have an electric fly zapper. I make no bones about that. We kill a lot of flies. But there are other times we just think, we can't kill every single one. It is impossible where we live. It's never going to happen. So why? I have a quick look at a drink before I drink it. I have a look at it, make sure there's no flies in there, because it happens. Don't want that to happen. So there are things that we don't have to accept, and there are things that we can accept, so we don't lose the plot and can still live a good, healthy, not getting ill because of flies life.
Oh, yes, yes. And that'd be really interesting should you move, or at some point we don't know, we don't know what the future holds. But it's just like you wonder how long that behavior, which is sensory driven, because having something in your drinking something when you don't expect or when you don't want something else in your drink, you want a nice smooth experience of it going down your throat. And when something's in there, it's like it's our instinctive reaction not to like it, and that is a very good reaction. But it'd be interesting. So moving out, if you move house, quite how long that behaviour would stay for, or whether it be something that would change quickly. Because something that's we often find, if there are some things that come from a sensory perspective, we develop that into a behaviour. It becomes a learned behaviour. Now, with you moving house, you might then think, oh, I don't have to do that with the coaster anymore. And it might take you a couple of days and that's it done. But there are some people who learn these behaviors, and that's the hard thing then to break afterwards. The sensory reason has gone, that there's no need for that, for that fear anymore or anything else. But the behavior continues, whatever that means, whether they're toe walking. Some people are toe walkers because of not liking sensory input when they were little, and they started toe walking and it became a habit, and then you get contractures, you get all kinds of things, and then they continue toe walking when actually they're not as sensitive as they were in their skin system. So they don't need to toe walk anymore, but they just do because that's a behavior that they've just learned and just carried on with. So that's an important point. But yeah, it's a good reason to understand why on earth has Andy B why is he doing that with his glasses, or why has he always got a lid on? And it's like, there's a good reason.
There's very good reason we dry the water off the top of the water filter so flies don't land on there. There is a limit to what you can do when you live in a countryside on a farm. You're going to get flies. There is a limit of what you can do. There is a limit of how much you clean. OCD, everyone sort of jokes about it. Oh, I've got OCD. Well, not necessarily. We clean the mugs quite frequently in between uses, not because we like a super clean mug, but if we've left it out on the side, do you know what? We want to make sure it's clean. Why? There's a good chance there's been a fly in it because we can't control them. So that's not OCD. That's called we want to not die tomorrow of a nasty illness. So we clean the mugs. So it's funny, isn't it? What we perceive, what we see, how we interpret that, and it's missing the point entirely, which is where we need somebody like you with a bit of a specialism, not me, to spot stuff. Which is why that cinema person did not come to me, but came to you, because you would have seen it very differently to me. I'd have just said, stop doing it, it's annoying, which isn't necessarily the best therapeutic approach.
There will be some that will need you rather than me, for sure. No, I haven't, but yeah, that's my therapy element, yeah.
Right, and thank you. Sensory healthy gardening, we've sort of touched on that a little bit. We're working through a series of sensory healthy things, environments, places, festivals, circuses, offices, food, gardening, with all sorts of things. And we're going to carry on with this because I quite like having a topic. But if you do have a question you had from someone anonymously today, send it anonymous. We won't mention your name, whatever you do. Unless you say, please use my name, in which case I might do it. Who knows? But you can send your questions to us, hello@pure247radio.org, hello@pure247radio.org. You can put your questions to Anne Laure Jackson on anything you might think is sensory health related for you, your family, or anything around you. And if you want to touch base with Anne and get her help or involvement in your life to sort whatever you got going on, pure247radio.org/ALJ, pure247radio.org/ALJ. I'm looking down at the monitor, even though that makes no sense logically. Anne Laure Jackson, thank you. And we'll see you again soon.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Bye.